Hey everyone, how's it going? Hope you're all doing great. Welcome to an episode of the Elixir Foundation series. In this episode right here, we're going to be exploring GenServers. So in the previous episode, we saw the problem of just using modules to render the page, and we realized that we need to track states. We need to track okay, which page are we rendering, and then we have like like Google hitting us with tens of 20 requests, 30 requests, even 100 requests all at once. We need to be able to handle that concurrently. And in Elixir, we have this thing called Genserver that will allow us to do that. So basically, in this episode right here, we're going to be exploring GenServers. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new file in the render directory. So previously, we wrote this code here, and it just doesn't work. So what we need to do is we need to encapsulate this a little bit differently. We need to use a different kind of construct we still want to have that bodyful.render.page pass in the URL, but then now we need to handle it a little bit differently. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a module, so def mod, and then bodyful.render.engine. And here I'm going to use GenServer. And then here, what I'm going to do is generally it's a convention when you want to have a GenServer, you have two kinds of functions. You have the public functions, which are basically public methods that are called by us. So basically, we would interface with these functions. And then basically, there's also what's called callback functions, which is part of GenServer. So our code, our functions call the callback, if you will. So here we'll see exactly what that means. So I'm going to do a def start link and then URL. Do and then end. So basically the idea is, let's say we have 20 requests for 20 pages all at once. We're going to use one GenServer to handle each page. So for example, let's say Googlebot is hitting us with 5 requests, and one is for the artilectural page, one is for the about page, one is for the home page, one is for the about page, one is for the contact page. 3 for argument's sake. And what we want to do is we want to pass each of those URL into separate GenServers, generates new GenServer for each of them. The GenServer handles the rendering and all that for each of these pages and then puts out the result. And this should be able to be done concurrently. So that's why we have different GenServers for all the different pages. That's kind of like the basic architecture, if you will, of what we're trying to achieve over here. So let me just correct this typo over here. So what we're going to do now is, we're going to do a GenServer.start link. And then here, I'm going to reference module. So here, actually, you can reference an external module. So you can separate public functions from callbacks. You just have to pass in the different module over here. But in this case, this is kind of like the convention. So we're going to just stick with it. So basically now we can pass in the URL as a second argument. But now if I just call start link, nothing's going to work because there's no callback function. So if I go to def init, so now we're handling the callback function. And now what we can do is just return OK, and then we can return a map and then URL. All right, so now let's try and start this. So I'm going to go into IEX mix. So now what we're going to do is we can start the rendering engine for a URL. So let's try and see what happens. So I'm going to go into, so let's, OK, PID equals bodyful.render.engine.start link. So this is where we pass in hit enter. So now we have the GenServer actually starting. So let's say, for example, we had another page called like the about page. Now we have 2 GenServers and they're all started. They're not doing anything, but they are started and ready to do the work, right? So that's kind of like the gist of, this is probably like the hello world of a GenServer, if you will. And basically now they all maintain this state. So I can actually even write functions that retrieve, okay, well, which page are you as a GenServer rendering? And then there's all kinds of ways, like for example, if I don't remember these PIDs, how do I actually reference, like for example, using a page? Like if I want to see the status of this particular page, like a home page, hey, where are you with the rendering? Like I want to reference using something I can remember, not this PID, but I can pass in a string and let it, Elixir has a way of, I'm not going to spoil it here, but has a way of using something called registries to make it easier for us to reference the GenServer using constructs that we're more familiar with, like the URL. So this is kind of like the hello world of GenServers, and we already understand the purpose to a certain extent. And let me explain a little bit about what this is. So what this is that this is the state that is going to be maintained now. And basically later on when we have functions that call the callbacks, we will always have reference to this URL inside of our GenServer. This is, I guess depending on how you look at it, it's very similar to like when you have a class in an object-oriented programming where you pass in, the attributes, and then you have instance variables that maintain. Kind of similar, but not entirely. But yeah, anyway, so in the next episode, that's it for this episode. We just want to show you the basic of how you actually start a GenServer, the most basic GenServer we have. And then basically in the next episode, I'm going to show you guys some of the more basic calls inside of GenServers and what you can do with them. So with that, I want to wrap up this episode. This is a members exclusive episode, so thank you very much for becoming a member. We appreciate your support. And with that, I want to wrap up this episode. I'll see you guys in the next one.